I used to think that using 10% of your brain was common knowledge, and then I started hearing this thing called the 10% myth. I started researching it, and everywhere I turned, I found renowned doctors spouting off that we used 100% of our brain. Then I realized something that struck me as odd. These so-called doctors were medical doctors. They were not neurologists or brain surgeons, but rather regular medical doctors. Now wait a minute, medical doctors are not trained in the field of the brain, even those doctors which are qualified for surgery are not. This is why there is a field of brain surgery all to itself. So then I thought, I wonder what these qualified professionals think. And then I started seeing everywhere with the qualified brain surgeons and neurologists, they were all in agreement on the term the brain is 10% functional at best. First off, I would like to debunk one lie that lets these medical doctors' assertions crumble. One of these lies that I've seen everywhere is that if you were to cut out a single part of the brain, you would die. However, this is just not true, as there is a procedure known as hemispherectomy, and this is where a brain surgeon must cut out and remove an entire hemisphere, leaving you with 50% of your brain. You literally will have half a brain. And I heard about on the news a young girl who was in high school got this hemispherectomy, and she was still the smartest girl in school, even after the procedure. Which is odd, too, that they're cut out an entire hemisphere, because that would technically be considered lobotomy at the same time, because you're cutting out half of the frontal lobe, but still no results. So I don't think the lobotomy making you a zombie claim is true either. Now, this is something that I found that I thought was interesting. This is a research report from the Dormancy of the Human Brain, Dormant Brain Research and Development Laboratory. This is from the TDA Lingo Director, and he says, the human brain is only 10% functional at best, and the first to outline this theory, later proved a fact by others, was Australian neurologist Noble Sir John Eccles, and he claims the brain indicates its powers are endless. In England, John Lorber did autopsies on hydrocephalics. This illness causes all but the 6-inch layer of the brain tissue to be dissolved by acidic spinal fluid. He tested the IQs of patients before and during the disease. His findings showed that the IQ remained constant up to death. Although over 90% of the brain tissue was destroyed by the disease, it had no impact on what we consider to be normal intelligence. And then we have Russian neurosurgeon Alexandry Luria proved that the 1/3 bulk of frontal lobes are mostly dormant. And he did this by performing ablation experiments on people. And he gave physiological and psychological tests before he cut out parts and whole frontal lobes. And then he retested later. And his conclusion was that removal of part or all of the frontal lobes causes no major change in brain function. There was some change in mood alteration. The frontal lobes are mostly dormant or asleep, he claims. And finally, the human brain contains 10 billion neurons, mostly in the outer layer of the brain cortex. The function of these currently dominant cells is fairly clear, but the brain also contains 100 billion glial cells, aside from some secondary nurturing of neurons. The primary function of the glial is not clear. And what Big Bang miracle awaits mankind within these mysteries? Today, most would agree without argument that the potential of the human brain is infinite. Thus, to state that a person uses 10%, 5%, or even 1% of their potential brain capacity is overly generous. He says the point is this, and this is the most important part to me. There is no dispute among honestly rational experts about the latent potential of the human think box. There is only friendly dispute about how much and what still awaits us. patiently to be self-discovered between each set of ears. Hence, the wisdom of intuitive folksay was correct. The human brain is only 10% functional. So there he states it, that him and anyone else that's professional in the field of neurology knows that it's only 10% functional. They only argue about how much we're using, which is actually dependent. And this is the point. When you do power meditation, you begin to use more of your brain. And the enemy fears this other 90% of the brain that we're not using. And that is why they go to such lengths to cover this up as a myth. So just remember that when you see this, the 10% myth and all this other lies that are out there on the internet or anywhere else that you find it, even if they have doctors supposedly claiming it, search all areas. You'll find that this is not a belief, it is a fact. Hail Satan.